My brother introduced me to 42 employees as the quiet sister who keeps the receipts from wandering off. He said it into a microphone at our company's 40th anniversary celebration, with our parents smiling behind him and vendor representatives gathered around folding tables in the center aisle. People laughed because Cole had always known how to make an insult sound affectionate, especially when the person being insulted was expected to smile along. Then he told everyone that if he was the gas pedal of Bennett Farm and Home Supply, I was the parking brake. The second joke drew a louder response, and Cole slipped one arm around my shoulders for the company photographer. I stepped out from under it. Luis Ortega, our warehouse supervisor, called from the second table that a parking brake kept a truck from rolling through a wall. A few employees laughed again, but Cole's expression changed. He ignored Luis, thanked everyone for coming, and handed the microphone back to the event coordinator. 10 minutes later, my father took me into the stockroom office and placed a one-page statement in front of me. A company pen rested beside the signature line, and my name had already been typed underneath it. The statement blamed a software conversion I had managed for $286,000 of inventory that could not be found. It also claimed that every affected item had been physically verified, even though no one had shown me a delivery record, storage address, or serial number for any of it. Dad told me the bank representative would arrive at 2 and tap the paper with one finger. "Sign it, Audrey." I read the last paragraph again, set the pen back on the desk, and told him I would not put my name on it. My father stared at me as if the parking brake had spoken without permission. My name is Audrey Bennett. I was 36 at the time, and I had spent 13 years working for the company my parents built in Western Ohio. Bennett Farm and Home Supply had started with one rented storefront, a used delivery van, and a handwritten ledger my mother kept beneath the register. By the time of the anniversary celebration, we operated 3 stores, employed 42 people, and were preparing a 4th location that Cole had promised would open before spring planting season. Cole was 2 years older than me and had been the public face of the company since he returned from college. He remembered customers' names, shook hands with suppliers, sponsored Little League teams, and could make an uncertain plan sound inevitable before anyone had worked out how to deliver it. I handled what came after the promise. When a supplier delayed a mower that Cole had guaranteed would arrive by Friday, I found another unit at a different store, arranged the transfer, corrected the serial number, and made sure the warranty followed it. Cole received the thank you note from the customer. I received a message after 9 that evening asking why the transfer had taken 20 minutes to appear on his screen. When he signed a large fertilizer agreement without checking how much we could legally store, I renegotiated delivery dates and found temporary space before the first trucks arrived. At Christmas, Dad toasted Cole for securing the biggest supplier agreement in company history. I sat 4 seats away and said nothing about the weeks I had spent preventing that agreement from becoming a safety violation. Mom always told me that Cole brought people in while I kept things from falling apart. She said we were important in different ways, and for years I accepted that explanation because it sounded fair. What I failed to notice was that Cole's kind of importance came with authority. Mine came with cleanup. The inventory problem had surfaced 2 weeks before the anniversary. Our independent accountant, Maya Grant, found a large difference between the equipment listed in the company's borrowing report and the equipment physically present at our stores. That did not automatically mean fraud. Inventory errors happened, especially during transfers and seasonal deliveries, but this was not a small count discrepancy. 43 purchase orders showed 0 turn mowers, commercial trimmers, utility trailers, and display units as fully received. No one could tell me where those machines were. Most of the orders belonged to the expansion program Cole had announced before the company approved a final opening date. He had already begun promoting the new store and taking calls from customers interested in equipment that our records claimed we owned. I first asked him for the address of the third-party warehouse where he said the units were being stored. He replied that he was working on it. When I asked for delivery confirmations, he said the vendor was consolidating the shipment. My next message asked why equipment still being consolidated had been recorded as delivered. Cole did not answer that question. Dad came to my office the following day and stood behind the guest chair instead of sitting in it. He said Cole believed I was delaying the bank renewal by treating a timing issue like a crisis. I explained that the bank had extended credit partly on the value of inventory we claimed to possess. Dad called the machines committed inventory, as though changing the adjective changed where they were. Committed isn't received, I told him. He glanced through the glass wall toward the hallway, then lowered his voice and said the equipment was coming. When I asked when, he told me I was missing the point and instructed me to finish the reconciliation without turning it into a seminar. That was how arguments worked in our family. Cole created momentum, Dad protected momentum, and any question that slowed them down became evidence that I lacked vision. Usually, I found a way to make the decision work. I had even helped create the habit. Months earlier, Cole asked me to override a receiving hold for a demonstration unit because the final vendor confirmation was basically done. The equipment arrived 2 days later. No money was lost, and I told myself that flexibility was part of supporting the business. Cole remembered the override differently. To him, it proved that the control had never been necessary and that my objections disappeared when enough pressure was applied. This time, however, the amount was too large and the explanation carried my name. I opened a formal exception review, preserved the system history, and asked the software provider for an independent record of the disputed entries. I also told Maya that I could not validate the inventory without delivery evidence. I did not tell Cole what I had requested, but I did not feel brave about it either. For 2 nights, I barely slept, imagining employees asking why their paychecks had failed because I refused to smooth over a report. Part of me still believed I could find safer wording, help the company through the renewal, and settle the family argument after the equipment arrived. That was the old solution. Absorb the risk now and ask for respect later. Then Dad handed me a statement that did not describe the inventory as pending or disputed. It said the machines existed, had been counted, and appeared missing only because of my software conversion. The page did not ask me to help the company, it asked me to become the explanation. That was why I refused. Mom had followed Dad into the stockroom office, still wearing the smile she had used for the anniversary photographs. Cole stood near the door with his arms folded while Dad pushed the statement toward me a second time. I asked Cole to show me one bill of lading or name the location where the machines had been stored. He said he did not carry shipping files in his pocket and accused me of repeating questions that had already been answered. Mom asked me not to turn a fixable issue into a family showdown. I told her the showdown had begun when someone typed my name under a statement I had already said was false. Cole's response was more personal. He said I was risking the company's credit line because I wanted everyone to admit I was smarter than he was. The accusation landed because it touched something real. I had spent years wanting my father to acknowledge that the work done after Cole's speeches was also leadership. Cole had watched me sit through every toast in his honor, and he knew how easily that old resentment could be turned against me. For a few seconds, I stared at the signature line and wondered whether refusing would make his version believable. Then I looked at the sentence claiming the inventory had been physically verified. I can't confirm that. Mom reminded me that 42 families depended on the business. It was her most effective form of pressure. Cole made the decision, but the consequences became a room full of innocent employees standing behind him. I told her those employees also depended on the bank being able to trust our numbers. Cole called that choosing paperwork over people, and Dad finally stopped asking. He suspended my administrative access effective immediately. Mom lowered her eyes. Cole looked relieved. I removed my key card from my bag, set it beside the unsigned statement, and asked Dad to put the suspension in writing. When he demanded to know why, I told him that verbal instructions had a way of becoming different stories in our family. Dad's face hardened, and he ordered me to leave the office. I walked back through the celebration without explaining myself to anyone. Near the lumber wall, I stopped in front of an old photograph showing Cole and me as children. He stood behind a toy register, grinning at the camera, while I sat on an upside-down bucket with a pencil and a small receipt pad. Dad had written "Future President" beneath Cole. Under my picture, he had written "Quiet Company." I had forgotten the photograph existed, but the roles were already there. Cole had been assigned the future. I had been assigned the work that would keep it running. At 1:18, while I sat in my car at the far edge of the parking lot, Dad sent an email confirming my suspension. He wrote that unresolved reporting errors associated with the software conversion required my access to be removed and that Cole would oversee completion of the bank package. He copied Mom, Cole, Maya, and Vivian Park, the bank officer handling our renewal. The email blamed my system before the review had been completed, placed Cole in charge of explaining entries made through his own account, and told the lender there was a reporting problem without describing what the problem actually was. My first impulse was to call Dad and ask whether he understood what he had just done. Instead, I called Dana Price, the attorney I had hired when my parents asked Cole and me to sign new shareholder agreements 2 years earlier. Dana asked whether I had signed the statement and whether Maya already had my reconciliation. After I answered, she warned me not to access the company system through any saved session, even if I still technically could. Cole had already begun building a second version of events. Audrey created the reporting problem and interfered when the company tried to review it. Logging in after suspension would give him something concrete to support that story. Dana helped me draft a factual response. I stated that I did not agree the variance had been caused by the conversion, explained that 43 orders lacked physical counts and delivery support, and confirmed that an independent audit history had been requested before my access was removed. I sent the response to everyone Dad had copied. Cole called twice, followed almost immediately by Mom and then Dad. I answered Mom after the 4th attempt because a part of me still believed I could explain the difference between correcting a record and attacking the family. She was crying by the time I picked up. She said I had embarrassed Dad in front of the bank and asked why I had not handled the disagreement privately. I reminded her that Dad had included the bank when he blamed my work. Mom said he had only been trying to explain the delay, but when I asked why his explanation required my name, she shifted to my tone and told me I sounded cold. I had spent 13 years canceling plans, answering calls while sick, and working late because I did not want the company to fail. Cole could create a 6-figure discrepancy and still be described as ambitious, while my refusal to cover it became proof that I wanted everyone else to suffer. I ended the call before the argument became louder. A few minutes later, Cole wrote in the family group chat that I had contacted the bank to embarrass him and damage the expansion. I corrected one fact. Dad had copied the bank first. Cole replied that I always needed the last word. I told him I needed the inventory location. No one provided one. Luis called that evening. He had worked for my parents for 21 years and knew how to disagree without making himself easy to punish. He told me the disputed machines had never passed through his dock. Cole had first said they were stored near Dayton, then claimed they would ship directly to the new location. When Luis continued asking, Cole told him to stop copying me because I was making the launch harder. Luis had already submitted his receiving reports to accounting, which meant he did not need to take sides or create new evidence. He only needed to tell Maya what had happened. Before hanging up, he warned me that Cole was telling managers I wanted his job. I asked whether they believed him. Luis said some did. That was Cole's strongest argument because it contained a piece of truth. I had wanted authority, but not because I wanted his office or his place at the head of a table. I wanted the ability to stop bad decisions before they arrived on my desk as emergencies. Cole translated that into jealousy because jealousy was easier for the family to understand than responsibility without power. The next morning, Maya requested a formal inventory review and Vivian postponed the renewal meeting while the disputed amount was removed from consideration. Payroll and ordinary purchasing continued, but Cole told managers that I had caused the bank to freeze the company's credit. By lunchtime, employees were asking whether their direct deposits were safe. I nearly sent a company-wide email defending myself. Dana asked whether I wanted to win the argument or protect the review, and although I resented the question, I knew she was right. Maya arranged for a short notice confirming that normal operations would continue and that records connected to the disputed orders should not be altered. It gave employees a procedure without turning them into an audience for our family dispute. Cole then found something more useful than another accusation. During the software conversion months earlier, a test import had briefly created a duplicate shipment. My team corrected the entry within an hour and documented the error before it reached any financial report. Cole circulated a screenshot showing the duplicate entry while leaving out the correction. He told Dad and several managers that the old error proved the missing inventory could also be a system problem. For the first time, I understood that he was not simply hoping the evidence would disappear. He was building an alternative explanation that sounded plausible to anyone who did not know the full history. Cole did not need everyone to believe he was innocent. He only needed them to believe the truth was too complicated to assign. Dad called that afternoon and said Cole had found proof of earlier software failures. I explained the test entry and reminded him that it had been corrected the same morning. Instead of asking why Cole had removed that context, Dad accused me of being determined to turn my brother into a villain. He said I had always resented how easily people trusted Cole. I asked him why he had never been interested in what Cole did with that trust. Dad ended the conversation. Maya later asked me to attend the physical count as a systems witness. I entered on a temporary visitor badge, used no company computer, and followed the review team through the 3 stores and the equipment yard. None of the missing machines were there. The 4th location was still an unfinished shell, but 6 display platforms had been arranged beneath bright manufacturer banners. Each platform had a laminated product card describing a machine our record said was already on hand. There was nothing on the platforms. Cole had prepared the space for photographs and pre-sales before the equipment had even been assigned to us. Dad stood in the middle of the empty floor and suggested that the carrier might have changed the delivery date. Luis handed Maya the delivery calendar, which showed there had never been a carrier appointment. Then Dad looked at me. I knew that look. He wanted me to offer a softer possibility, something that would allow everyone to leave the building without deciding who had lied. I asked Maya whether the count was complete. When she said yes, I left before Dad could turn the empty platforms into another private conversation about loyalty. Mom called my aunt before she called me. By lunchtime, the story had become a technical disagreement fueled by sibling resentment, with the future of a 40-year-old family business hanging in the balance. I asked my aunt whether Mom had mentioned the unsigned statement or the missing deliveries. She had not. Mom had found time to explain my personality before asking where the equipment was. After that call, I muted the family group chat. The decision was harder than refusing the signature because the chat contained people I loved, and muting it meant allowing them to discuss me without immediate correction. For years, I had believed every false claim required an answer. I was beginning to see how answering each one only gave Cole another opening to move the argument away from the missing machines. Through Dana, I requested a meeting of the company's 4 owners. My parents each owned 30%, while Cole and I each owned 20%. I did not ask for Cole to be fired or demand control of the company. I asked for the audit history, vendor correspondence, receiving reports, and original bank figures to be placed in front of all 4 owners at the same time. The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. During the 6 days before it, my family tried every version of the role they had assigned me. Dad reminded me that he had built the company before I knew how to read a purchase order. Cole repeated that I had always wanted his position. Mom called each day asking for one private concession that might calm the situation. She wanted me to tell Vivian that I believed the equipment would eventually arrive. When I asked whether she knew that, Mom said Cole believed it. When I asked whether she had seen a delivery confirmation, she told me that families were supposed to trust one another. That was the first time I said aloud what had bothered me for years. Trust in our family moved in one direction. Cole received authority before producing evidence, while I received responsibility after everyone else had made the decision. Mom began crying and said I had become hard. I almost answered with one of the polished lines I had been repeating in my head, but the truth did not need polishing. I'm not putting my name on something false. She asked whether I could at least stop treating Cole like a criminal. I said I was treating him like the person whose account had entered the orders. Mom hung up. The ownership meeting took place in the conference room above the original store. There was no stage or microphone, only a scarred oak table, a speakerphone, and a tray of grocery store cookies nobody touched. Dad sat at the head of the table with Mom beside him. Cole arrived 10 minutes late and placed his phone in front of him as if everyone else had started too early. Vivian attended for the bank, Maya sat across from me, and Dana joined by video. Dad began with the speech about 40 years of family trust. Maya let him finish one sentence before placing the audit history in the center of the table. The same username appeared beside every disputed order: C. Bennett Admin. Cole claimed his credentials had been shared during the conversion. Maya pointed out that the entries had been verified through the company phone assigned to him, but Cole said phones were left around all the time. Dad immediately asked whether someone else could have used it. For a moment, I watched the entire family prepare to live inside that uncertainty. Vivian brought the discussion back to the only question that mattered. She asked whether the equipment had been physically present when the orders were marked received. Cole did not answer her. He turned toward me and said I had transformed a temporary timing issue into a banking crisis. Dad supported him by arguing that the machines still had value because we had placed deposits. Maya responded by sliding a vendor email beside the audit history. The email stated that our deposits reserved production slots only. No serial numbered units had been assigned, shipped, or transferred to Bennett Farm and Home Supply. It had been sent directly to Cole 3 weeks before the first disputed order was recorded as received. Mom read the first paragraph twice before asking whether he had seen it. Cole said he had a verbal understanding with the vendor representative and that the email existed only to protect the manufacturer. Vivian told him that a verbal understanding did not make the equipment eligible inventory. Cole then turned his phone around and displayed the old screenshot from the conversion test. He said my own system had produced false inventory before and accused me of hiding behind technical explanations whenever the facts became inconvenient. I explained that the test error had been corrected within an hour and had never appeared in a bank report. Maya confirmed the correction date. Dad listened to all of it and then asked how quickly I could repair the current report. He had not asked Cole why he ignored the vendor email or why he entered equipment that had never arrived. Even with Cole's username repeated across 7 pages, Dad had returned to the solution he understood best. Audrey would clean it up. Cole leaned back in his chair and said the company needed solutions, not another lecture from the parking brake. The phrase that had sounded like a joke during the anniversary celebration now sounded like an instruction to return to my place. Maya asked him directly whether he had used the administrator's screen to mark the machines received. Cole looked at the audit history, then at the vendor email, before turning toward Dad. He said the bank renewal could not survive another expansion delay, and that Dad had ordered him to keep the numbers on schedule until the equipment shipped. Dad denied telling him to record goods that had not arrived. Cole stopped protecting him. He said Dad had demanded a clean renewal, refused to hear about another delay, and made it clear that the fourth store could not be postponed again. For the first time, the two of them argued over who had created the problem instead of who should absorb it. Mom asked for a break so we could speak as a family. I reached into my bag and placed a transition proposal on the table. I would help correct the inventory records and train an independent controller for 60 days under a written consulting agreement. I would not report to Cole, approve unsupported numbers, or remain in my former position after the transition ended. Cole called the proposal a takeover. I told him I was not taking his job. That answer seemed to anger him more than any accusation. He had spent years explaining my objections as a hidden desire to become him, and my refusal to inherit his position removed the excuse he understood best. Dad warned that employees would assume I caused the crisis if I left during the transition. Then tell them what happened. He said the company needed me. Once, those words would have sounded like recognition. Now I could hear the condition attached to them. The company needed my labor, but my family still did not want my limits. Vivian explained that the bank required independent oversight before the full credit line could be restored. Maya confirmed that the system had flagged the manual receipts and that Luis had submitted the receiving exceptions on time. Mom made one final attempt to return responsibility to me. She asked whether the software could have prevented Cole from completing the entries at all. I told her the controls had raised every warning they were designed to raise. Management ignored them. Dad read the transition proposal twice. He did not apologize or defend Cole again. He signed it. The following 60 days were difficult, but they were no longer undefined. Cole challenged nearly every new approval. When the controller requested written vendor terms, he called the vendor directly and tried to move forward without her review. After she stopped the order, he told store managers that fear had replaced leadership. I documented each bypass and let the controller enforce the process. For the first time in my career, I did not answer every accusation or turn every delay into a personal emergency. Mom brought coffee into my temporary office twice and tried to redirect operational meetings toward forgiveness. The first time, I listened longer than I should have. The second time, I asked whether she had come to discuss the reconciliation. She said I was treating her like an employee. I reminded her that we were at work. Dad apologized once, though he avoided the part that mattered most. He said he should not have put my name on the statement before all the facts were available. I told him he had already known I disagreed. After a long pause, he said he had believed I would help the family through the problem. I answered that he had confused helping with taking the blame. Dad did not argue, but he did not apologize again either. The corrected inventory report reduced the company's borrowing capacity, although the business stayed open and every employee continued receiving a paycheck. The fourth store launch was postponed. Part of the equipment deposit was converted into a smaller confirmed order, and the empty display platforms were removed. At the next staff meeting, Dad read a short correction prepared with Maya. He said management had reported unsupported inventory and confirmed that the software had functioned as designed. He did not name Cole, which disappointed me, but he also did not use my name as a shield. By the time my final Friday arrived, there was no celebration, and I did not want one. I trained the new controller on the exception dashboard, handed over the administrative key, and removed my personal number from the after-hours vendor list. Luis brought me a cardboard box for the few things in my desk. Inside were 2 coffee mugs, a spare charger, a tape measure, and the photograph from the anniversary wall. Cole stood behind the toy register beneath the words, "Future President." I sat on the upside-down bucket beneath Quiet Company. I drew one black line through the words under my picture and placed the photograph in the box. That Sunday, my parents invited me to dinner. I went because leaving the company did not require pretending I had no parents, although I no longer intended to carry work into their dining room. Cole did not come. Halfway through the meal, Dad reached beside his chair and placed a vendor folder near my plate. He quickly said it was not really work and that he only wanted me to look at one clause. For 13 years, that was how responsibility entered my life. It did not arrive as a request with a deadline or a choice. Someone simply placed it near my hand and waited for me to pick it up. I moved the folder back to his side of the table. "Send it to the controller tomorrow." Dad said it would take me 5 minutes. I told him that meant it would take her 5 minutes too. Mom looked from the folder to me. Usually she would have asked me not to make dinner uncomfortable, but this time she remained quiet. Dad picked up the folder and placed it on the floor beside his chair. Then we finished eating. Future work requests came through the controller with a defined scope, an hourly rate, and a date by which I could accept or decline. Sometimes I agreed to help, and sometimes I did not. My family had always praised me for being dependable, but only when dependence worked in their favor. They called me quiet because it sounded kinder than admitting they expected me not to object. The audit did not prove I was more talented than Cole. It proved that he had been allowed to make decisions without carrying their consequences, while I had been expected to carry consequences without sharing the authority behind them. The next time my family needed something from me, they did not place a folder near my hand or add my name before asking. They made a request and waited for my answer. If your family praised you for being dependable but only respected you when you accepted the blame, how long would you keep helping on their terms?